All right. Silly arguments that come from Catholics and Orthodox. Part 8 here. And this one is succession. As if succession proves anything other than succession. Right? They act as though just because someone was taught by somebody means that they are actually following and teaching everything they were taught by that person. And they leave out actual evidence to the contrary, such as Lucifer being taught directly from God. But if you were one of the angels in heaven before the fall, and you followed Lucifer, thinking he was closer to God than you, you would have been led astray, right? The same thing with Judas, taught directly by Jesus himself, right? But not somebody you would want to follow, right? We have this throughout history, not just in the scriptures either, even though what matters is what we see in the scriptures, where we have David, the beloved king, has a son, Solomon, and he's leading in a time of peace, the wisest man on earth, right? And David's son, right? Yet he led the nation into apostasy. But he's the direct successor and son of David, though. So you should just blindly follow him into that apostasy, right? The Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. But if you followed them, you would have rejected Jesus as the Messiah. Succession doesn't mean diddly squat other than succession, right? But they act as though succession means infallible and that you can't be wrong and that you cannot fall away, right? It's a ridiculous and very silly argument, right? And I'll give another example that's outside of scriptures, just to show how these Catholics and Orthodox are very inconsistent, right? Because they're not going to use this same argument when it comes to government, right? We go to the United States government. Well, the current president, right? Donald Trump is in succession of George Washington. Does that mean he has the same beliefs and stance of government that George Washington has? No, it doesn't. So it just means that he's in succession. He's in line of the presidents. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything other than that. It doesn't mean he's infallible or never wrong and he does everything right, that he's basically just another George Washington, right? Not at all, right? And to think so is silly, and that's being nice. It's stupid, right? And Catholics and Orthodox would agree with me if I started with that premise of looking at our government first. You would say, yeah, succession doesn't matter. All it means is succession. Exactly, right? That's all it means. And it doesn't matter if each president even picked the next president and taught the next president. Doesn't mean they're actually saying and doing the same things. Right? You can see this in monarchies. Like I mentioned with King David and his own son. Right? It doesn't matter. Right? Just because you're in succession doesn't mean that you're actually following the person who you're in succession to. That's the point. What actually matters is not succession, but whether or not you actually are following Jesus and the apostles and their teachings as clearly shown to us in the scriptures. So you see, if people are in succession of Jesus and the apostles, but they start drifting away from what Jesus and the apostles actually taught, their succession doesn't mean anything. It's pointless and useless. It's a waste. It doesn't mean anything. There's no reason to follow it. But then, if somebody 1,500 years later, or even 2,000 years later, goes and directly to Jesus and the apostles and follows what they're teaching, well, then they're in line with the truth. They're in line with God. They're basically in direct succession to Jesus and the apostles. It's basically like this mindset these Catholics and Orthodox have towards these saints, where I get into some of their forums at times, and one of these forums, they'll have the saint of the day, right? And it's like every day they bring up some different saint and talk about how great this person was. And it's like, man, if they just gave that much attention and focus to Jesus, the one who actually loves them and died for them, these people don't even know him and don't give a rat's ass about him, right? But sometimes I read about these saints they bring up. And what I think is funny is that sometimes these saints, they got some pretty good, accolades, a resume there. But they'll say things like, they focus on God. They'll focus on Jesus, right? And that's what they do. So that's what you ought to do, right? You sit there and you post about these saints and talk about how great they are, right? And you basically want to be their successors. But in order to be their successor, you have to do what they were doing. So what were these saints doing? They were talking about how they followed God. They dedicated themselves to God. Well, then, don't dedicate yourself to the saint and being like the saint. Dedicate yourself to God and going after God. The point being is that the apostles, who did they go to? Jesus. They go directly to God. You want to be like them? You don't follow them. You go to God like they did. Right? You do what they did. They relied on the scriptures. Do what they did. Right? So anyway, with all that being said, thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it. I guess, take care of yourself there. Times are crazy. I'll see you in the next one, and may God bless you and yours.